And the White House says police reform will be a key part of President Biden's first address to a joint session of Congress Wednesday night, part of an ambitious agenda he hopes to pass with the slimmest majorities in the U.S. Senate. As the nation waited to hear from the Chauvin jury, I spoke exclusively with Vice President Kamala Harris about her history-making role, the weight of the responsibility that brings, and how and when President Biden seeks her advice.
9 minutes and 29 seconds, right? We all watched that video. Many of us watched it multiple times. And people are in pain over what we all saw in that video. And in fact, it was in large part because of that case that, together with my then colleagues, Cory Booker in particular, and then on the House side, Karen Bass, that we wrote the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And I really do hope that the United States Senate, the House has passed it, that the United States Senate will take it on and have the courage to take it on, because there is no question that we've got to put an end to these moments where the public questions whether there's going to be accountability, questions whether there's going to be the kind of fairness that we should all expect and deserve in all of our lives, and in particular as it relates to people of color, with a particular emphasis on black and brown men in the criminal justice system as it relates to policing. This verdict is but a piece of it, and it will not heal the pain that existed for generations, that has existed for generations among people who have experienced and firsthand witnessed what now a broader public is seeing because of smartphones and the ubiquity of our ability to videotape in real time what is happening in front of our faces. And that's just the reality of it. And that's why Congress needs to act. And that's why they should pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
This is really a moment in America.
Yeah.
Racial tensions, as you just mentioned, they are really palpable. Your experience, your life experience, is different from every one of your predecessors. Mm-hmm. How is that bringing itself to bear right here in the White House?
Well, I think that, first of all, you'll recall that when Joe Biden asked me to join him on the ticket, he did so with a sense of intentionality, of purpose, knowing that he and I may have very different life experiences, but we also have the same values and operate from the same principles. But it was something that I know he was very intentional about in terms of asking me to run with him and to serve with him, which is that I will bring a perspective that will contribute to the overall decisions that we make. He and I are in almost every meeting together. Have made almost every decision together. I'm not going to talk about our private conversations, of course, but I can tell you that it is often the case that as I will ask his opinion about things, he will ask my opinion, and through that process, I think that we arrive at a good place, and ultimately, of course, he is the president and he makes the final decision.
Do you feel a special responsibility, given the fact that...
Listen, I carry a great weight of responsibility, knowing that there are so many people, again, the generations of women who fought for and imagined there would be a woman vice president or a woman on the ticket. And I think of that all the time in terms of the responsibility I have to hopefully make them proud. I carry a great sense of responsibility for all of the young girls and boys of color, those who identify in some way because maybe no one expected something of them, but they expect a lot of themselves, to do well and to do right and to do good. So yes, I carry a great sense of responsibility, if not of the seriousness of the responsibility, to be in this position and be a voice for those who have not traditionally been in the room.
You mentioned police reform a couple of times. The House, of course, has passed the bill that you were a co-sponsor of when you were in the Senate, but it doesn't have, there's not a high hope for it to pass as is.
in the United States Senate. So, you talked about the fact that you have a special responsibility. The president talked about the fact that he would always have the backs of African Americans in this country. So will you and he get more involved in the informal negotiations going on, and if so, how?
Well, we've made our position clear, each of us, and as an administration, we've made our position clear. But it is for the folks in the Senate to work together to resolve whatever may be differences of opinion about the details of the legislation. But I think there's no question that the American people, in a bipartisan way, realize and want that there will be some reform of this system.
More broadly, there have been at least 50 mass shootings in America in a little over a month. Your administration has made clear that infrastructure is the next big legislative priority. Why not guns? Anthony Fauci told me over the weekend that gun violence is a public health emergency.
Well, I would disagree. We actually, as an administration, have taken action. The president issued executive orders, for example, on ghost guns. And there is only so much, however, that a president can do through executive action. This president, Joe Biden, has a long-standing history of speaking very clearly and unambiguously about the need for smart gun safety laws, back from the time that he was in the Senate through today. But I guess that emphasizes the point that both when he was in the Senate, when I was in the Senate, same thing, we were pushing for legislation. Congress has to act.
Exactly.
Because we have to codify, that's a fancy word for make permanent, make the law that we agree we should have background checks. That's just reasonable gun safety laws. We should have an assault weapons ban. Assault weapons have been designed to kill a lot of people quickly. They are weapons of war, and Congress has to act, Dana. I mean, I was recently in Connecticut. Senators Murphy and Blumenthal and the governor there, so many people, the families of Sandy Hook. I honestly thought that when those babies, 26 and 7-year-old children, were slaughtered, I really thought Congress would act. I thought that would be the thing. And it didn't happen.
But do you think it can happen? My question was about your priority as an administration,
but
pushing it harder.
But it is part of our priority. We have to multitask, so not one to the exclusion of the other.
President Biden gave Kamala Harris her first major assignment as vice president, and critics are seizing on it. I'll ask her about that next. Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Dana Bash. Close to 100 days in, and Vice President Kamala Harris's role inside the Biden administration is taking shape. The president has said he wants her to be the last person in the room when he makes a big decision, and he recently made her the point person on one of the biggest challenges facing his young presidency.
Let me ask about immigration.
Of course.
President Biden tasked you with leading diplomatic efforts to work with Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries to address the root causes of migration. How do you define success in this role?
It's a great question. Well, let's first talk about what it is. I come at this issue from the perspective that most people don't want to leave home. They don't want to leave their grandparents. They don't want to leave the place where they grew up, where they speak the language, where they know the culture, the place where the place that is home. Most people don't want to leave home, and when they do, it's usually for one of two reasons. They're fleeing some harm, or they cannot stay and satisfy the basic necessities of life, such as feeding their children and having a roof over their head. That is a big part of what is going on. So I look at the issue of what's going on in the Northern Triangle from that perspective. And then my take on it is that we've got to, understanding that, we have to give people some sense of hope. That if they stay, that help is on the way. And that brings me to then my focus, which is, for example, I convened a group of members of our cabinet Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Commerce, the head of the USAID, which is our aid organization. Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, was a part of it. Jake Sullivan was a part of it. And bringing together members of our cabinet to do what, for example, is going to happen out of Commerce, which is they're going to convene a trade mission virtually now, and then the hope is in person later. With Agriculture, Tom Vilsack is going to increase our focus and our resources around helping the farmers in that region who have been devastated by crisis in terms of climate and drought. USAID, we're increasing our disaster response because, again, of the hurricanes. So this is the kind of work that has to happen. The kind of work that has to happen is the diplomatic work that we've been engaged in including my calls to the President of Mexico, the President of Guatemala, and we have a plan to actually have another meeting coming up soon.
Are you going to go there?
In that regard, it is, yes, we're working on the plan to get there. We have to deal with COVID issues, but I can't get there soon enough in terms of personally getting there. And then we have to also look at the piece about community-based organizations. So, for example, this week, in addition, or next week, in addition to meeting again with the President of Guatemala, I will be meeting the following day with the community-based organizations in Guatemala. They call them basically civil society, to figure out how we can better assist what they're doing on the ground in a way, again, that they can give the resources to people who naturally want to stay at home and give them some sense of hope that help is on the way. This is the work that we're doing, but it's not going to be solved overnight. It's a complex issue. Listen, if this were easy, it would have been handled years ago.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. When President Biden said, you know, would you like to do this or not? Would you like to, you will do this? Did you say, oh, gee, thanks, Mr. President?
No, he asked me to do it,
Yeah.
just as he was asked to do it. Joe Biden, as vice president, was asked by President Obama to focus on the Northern Triangle. And he has asked me to do and to carry on the work that he did. And, you know, you get back to the question that you've asked. We're making progress, but it's not going to evidence itself overnight. It will not. But it will be worth it. And I will tell you, part of my approach to this is we've got to institutionalize the work and also internationalize it, which is why, for example, I'm working with Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, and we're going to be increasing the request we're making of our allies in the United Nations. Because, again, this is about the Western Hemisphere. We are a neighbor in the Western Hemisphere, and it is also about understanding that we have the capacity to actually get in there if we are consistent. Part of the problem is that under the previous administration, they pulled out, essentially, a lot of what had been the continuum of work. And it essentially came to a standstill.
You're rebuilding it.
We have to rebuild it. And I've made it very clear to our team that this has to be a function of a priority that is an American priority, and not just a function of whoever happens to be sitting in this chair. Because, for example, looking at, again, the root causes, extreme weather conditions has had a huge impact on one of their biggest industries, which is agriculture, including drought, right? And so a residual point not only is about the economic devastation and what we need to do to assist with economic development and relief, but it's also, they've got extreme hunger there and food insecurity. And so what we need to do to address that, because again, if parents and if children cannot literally eat, if they cannot have the basic essential things that everyone needs to live, of course they're going to flee, and that's what we're saying.
President Biden always said that he wants you to be the last person in the room, particularly for big decisions, just as he was for President Obama. He just made a really big decision, Afghanistan.
Yes.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do. And I'm going to add to that. This is a president who has an extraordinary amount of courage. He is someone who I have seen over and over again make decisions based on what he truly believes, based on his years of doing this work and studying these issues, what he truly believes is the right thing to do. And I'm going to tell you something about him. He is acutely aware that it may not be politically popular or advantageous for him personally. It's really something to see. And I wish that the American public could see sometimes what I see. Because ultimately, and the decision always rests with him, but I have seen him over and over again make decisions based exactly on what he believes is right, regardless of what maybe the political people tell him is in his best selfish interest.
We're almost at 100 days. Tell me something that has surprised you, that you never thought you would see, hear, or feel personally as the Vice President of the United States.
We are going to lift half of America's children out of poverty, Dana. How about that? How about that? Think about that. I can't tell, maybe it's obvious, how much that means. How much, what that will mean. That's good stuff. That's really good stuff.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.